Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. 2022 has been a record-breaking year. As I have mentioned several times, every month temperatures have been above the central England temperature average. But one of the first rules which investors learn is this: past performance is no indicator of future performance. Why is that relevant to the weather? Well, let's take a look at the details. I'll start with the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The animation runs from 18 GMT, Tuesday the 29th. To begin with, high pressure is centred to the northeast of the UK and it's blocking the eastwards progression of Atlantic weather fronts. And I think that really sets the theme for much of the next 2 weeks and helps to explain why the investor's golden rule is relevant for the weather. The mild conditions, above average temperatures, which we've been experiencing for much of this year, look like they will be coming to a shuddering end. Right, I'll run the sequence. Let's see what happens. Well, in the short term, there's a little bit of rain at times from north and northwest, but elsewhere it's dry. Light winds also mean patchy overnight fog and frost. The fog could well be slow to lift during the days, and where it lingers, it will stay cold or very cold. Now, through the weekend on this particular animation, which is based upon the GFS model, an area of low pressure pushes down from the north and it brings rain, some heavy bursts there, and also hill snow over western parts of the UK. There's a good deal of uncertainty about this, though. A lot of the other computer model runs are keeping us under drier conditions with that easterly flow persisting through the weekend. The low pressure not really developing so much or being centred further west in the Atlantic. Just running this though through to its conclusion, the low pressure moves away southwards, the easterly flow strengthens across the UK and the further patchy spells of rain in the east, some of those are falling as snow over higher ground, maybe by then down to say 200 or 300 metres, so certainly places like the North Yorkshire Moors and the Pennines could be seeing some snow if this is correct. By the end of the period, it's an east or northeasterly flow across the UK, and although on this particular sequence it's not clear, some computer model runs are suggesting that low pressure down here will be centred further north, closer to the UK, and it may be starting to have an influence, perhaps bringing milder air back into southern counties. I'll look at that a little bit later on. The air temperature sequence associated with the GFS run, so again starting 18 GMT, Tuesday the 29th, greens over the UK indicating close to average for the 30-year norm. Running this though, what happens is progressively the cold blues make their way westwards across the UK through the week, and finishing here on Wednesday the 7th, it looks rather cold or cold in all areas. These are the values, of course, at about 1,500 metres above sea level. How are they influencing the temperatures that we can expect down at the ground? Just to step through a few charts. 15 GMT, Wednesday the 30th. Single figures there, 6s, 7s, 8s in the south. A little bit colder as you head northwards. Then moving forwards to Friday, temperatures are dipping a little bit, but not a great deal, still close to the seasonal norm, perhaps just a little bit below it. And as I mentioned, in places where fog is slow to lift, it will be somewhat colder than this. Moving forwards to Sunday, maximums again. By now they are lower in all parts, only 3, 4 or 5 in much of England and Wales, maybe a little bit colder still in Scotland. So definitely a downwards trend appearing. In terms of the overnight minimums, well, with quite a lot of cloud around, frost is likely to be patchy on most nights rather than widespread. This is just an example to illustrate the possibilities. 06 GMT, Monday the 5th of December, the coldest conditions generally in the west there, Wales well below freezing, and in parts of the south, the northwest as well. Because the winds are going to be coming in from the east, clear spells are more likely in the western half of the UK. I suspect that's where on a number of nights the frost risk will be the highest. Finally, moving forwards to Tuesday afternoon to see the maximums. Similar values again, 5s, 6s or 7s in central and eastern England, colder there in the north. All in all though, quite a cold picture developing as we go through the first week if the GFS is correct. Now, rainfall. Days 0 to 5 here from the ECM model on the left, GFS on the right. Wettest in the northwest. For GFS chart on the right, that's quite interesting because it also shows significant amounts of rain in Wales. I think some of that's associated with the area of low pressure which pushes southwards through the weekend. And as I mentioned, over higher ground, sleet or snow would be likely. But the ECM chart on the left there shows 0 millimeters of rain or any form of precipitation in Wales through this period. I think, as I mentioned, it's keeping that area of low pressure further west or not developing it to the extent which a GFS is. Days 0 to 10, and totals have increased a little bit, but fairly dry or very dry even in much of the UK. The wettest conditions in the far northwest. With colder air coming into the mix, it may not just be rain, of course, there could be some snow around, and forecasting snow depths is notoriously difficult and prone to error in the UK, but I just thought it would be quite interesting to bring up these two charts from the GFS model. The one on the left is valid at 00 GMT Sunday, the 4th of December. It's showing accumulations of snow over high ground in Wales, parts of the Pennines and up into Scotland. On the right, it's for Friday, the 9th of December. By this point, there's significantly more snow over the Scottish Highlands and even down to lower levels up there. Parts of northern England seeing some snow too, and the high ground in Wales once more increasing its accumulations a little bit. But these are just finger in the air charts at this range from one deterministic model, and as I said, I'm just bringing them up for interest to illustrate the sorts of things which are possible as we go through the first week or so. Well, with a rather cold and potentially wintry picture developing according to the GFS, how do the deterministic models compare with each other towards the end of the first week? Just to recap, here is the GFS, Tuesday the 6th of December, and what I've done this week is added the air temperature profile for the UK at the same time as the pressure chart on the left, just to give an indication of what sort of air mass is moving across the UK with the associated pressure pattern which the model is going for. GFS, therefore, high pressure to the north of the UK, low pressure tending to be to the south, and a rather cold air mass covering the country. Values there between about -4 Celsius and -6 Celsius at the 850 HPA level, so 1,500 meters or so above sea level. The GFSP, so the parallel GFS model, the development version, shows a similar story. It's a rather cold pattern, high pressure there to the north, low pressure from the south possibly having more influence than it did on the GFS. Next, the Canadian model, once again a similar story. The German icon, I can't show you the air temperature plot for the UK because it's not generated on the Weather Outlook for this particular model at the moment, but the general story is a similar one, high pressure to the west. If anything, there's a stronger signal here for a plunge of cold air to move down from the north, all in all though it's a chilly picture. Onto the ECM, very, very strong high pressure areas over Greenland to the northwest. It's a cold pattern over the UK. The air temperature charts there, similar to on some of the other models. Just a hint there though of milder air moving into southern England. And finally, the UK Met Office global model, high pressure to the west, to the northwest. This has low pressure moving up from the south, and there's some less cold air moving around it. You can see on the right-hand chart there, in southeastern England and East Anglia, the values are positive. The greens are starting to reappear. The colder air there in the northern half of the UK. Taking it all together though, those different forecasts from the different computer models, it's a rather cold picture towards the end of the first week. There is a chance of low pressure pushing up from the south to southwest. That could lead to rain, maybe hill snow or even snowfall into lower levels on its northern edge, perhaps the Midlands or northern England, but very, very iffy to make a forecast like that at this range. Very, very speculative, but it is something to keep an eye on. All in all, a wintry picture is favoured at the end of the first week. And just to reinforce that message really, the air temperature charts from the MOGREPS G model, so the UK Met Office ensemble, mostly support that rather cold picture. A few of them though have the milder air pushing up from the southwest into southern Britain. As I say, keep an eye on that as the time approaches. With the end of week one generally looking cold according to most model data, what happens as we go through week two? Here's the 16-day GEFS chart for London. It's all about trends and probabilities at this range, so using ensemble data. Air temperatures across the top, the thick black line, the 30-year norm here, the thick purple line, the ensemble mean. And it's staying significantly below that 30-year norm throughout the period. Colder than average conditions are strongly being supported by this, but it's worth pointing out there are some milder solutions. It's not certain that it will be cold. Some of the runs here are well above that thick black line, the 30-year norm. There are 30 different perturbations, as they're called, in the GEFS model. Then there's the control run, and there's the ensemble mean and the GFS operational. All those are individual lines on this chart. So the idea is that the starting conditions in the different perturbations are adjusted slightly to help account for uncertainty. And while some individual runs are showing milder solutions, they are in a minority, but never ever discount that scenario. It is possible we could see low pressure spinning up close to the UK, for example, and milder air being pulled up from the southwest or the south to southeast, especially across the southern half of the UK. In terms of rainfall, or I should really say precipitation now, because we can start thinking about snow a little bit more, there are some spikes continuing to appear. It doesn't look overly wet. Will the precipitation be falling as snow, or is there a chance of it doing so? The snow row gives some clues. Values there ranging between about 5 and 7 during the second week. The maximum the snow row can be is 33, therefore 7, something like a 20-25% chance of snow falling. Not necessarily accumulating, as I always say with these snow row values, it could just be a few flakes of snow mixed into a shower or a longer spell of rain. Here's the snow depth chart for London. I just thought it would be quite fun to have a look at these. I'm not that convinced about their accuracy for the UK. Snow forecasting accumulations of snow is very difficult because parameters are often so marginal. Nonetheless, here's the London chart. Towards the end there, from the 11th of December onwards, a couple of runs are forecasting accumulating snow. The vertical axis shows the depth in centimetres. All in all, though, most of the runs are not pointing towards snow settling in London. 2 metre temperature data table for London. Again, from the GEFS. It's the dark greens which are dominant through the second week. Those are runs going for cold conditions. Maximum values are between 1 and 5 Celsius. Towards the very end, there's a little bit of blue showing up and also a little yellow. So that means there's a greater spread of solutions. The blues are very cold, ice days, 0 Celsius or lower, and the yellows are milder conditions between 11 and 15 Celsius maximums. But the signal is that it will probably remain cold for most of the second week, even in the south. But there is that chance of it turning milder, especially I would say to the south of London as low pressure maybe starts to feed up warmer or milder air from the southwest. The 16-day GEFS chart for Manchester, so heading northwest. The air temperature profile very similar to the London one, well below average. Still a few mild runs in the mix. And the rain or snow risk across the bottom, a number of spikes showing up there, perhaps a few more than there were on the London one. Also, the snow row values are higher. In fact, at the end of week 1, they're reaching 14. Through the second week, up to 10 at the very end. So the snow risk in Manchester probably low to moderate through the second week, higher than it was further south. The snow depth chart for Manchester. More runs are forecast in accumulating snow, especially there from the 11th of December onwards, and one of them is going up to about 35 centimetres. That's one run out of 33 though. It's very, very unlikely, not to be totally discounted, something to keep an eye on. The 2-metre temperature data table for Manchester, similar pattern to the London one, the dark green's been dominant, some light green in the mix. Also towards the end, the amount of blue starts to grow, and by the end it's reaching 19%. That's 19% of the runs going for maximum daytime temperatures of between 0 Celsius and -8. Ice days being forecast by some of the individual perturbations in the GEFS for Manchester. Up to Glasgow, and the air temperature chart, the profile is very similar. It's a little bit lower, so a bit colder if anything from more southerly locations. But the pattern's the same, well below the 30-year norm. Not really any runs climbing above that thick black line, at least early on. It's just towards the end where a few start to rise above it. It's suggesting a high degree of confidence in it remaining cold or very cold in the north through the second week. Again, it's really just supporting that pattern which I've been discussing about the chance of low pressure moving up from the south and returning milder conditions to southern and maybe central parts of the UK. A much lower chance of that happening as you go further north. Precipitation across the bottom, some spikes there, not particularly wet. The snow row values up to 13 at the very end. A moderate risk of snow is how I would describe it. In terms of the runs forecast in accumulating snow, there are more here than there were on the Manchester and London plots. In fact, by the 11th of December, there's quite a significant minority which are going for snow to be settling in the northwest of the UK. It's not just the Glasgow city centre which this plot is for. The grid point which I've labelled as being Glasgow does cover quite a big area, so a little bit further inland. So amounts of snow, if this was correct, would probably be varying according to the exact locality, proximity to the coast and altitude being factors. The 2-metre temperature data table for Glasgow, look at this one, look at this, the amount of blues there increasing, and by the end it's reaching 52%. I think that's astonishingly high. 52% of the runs at 16 days ahead or thereabouts are forecasting maximum temperatures of between 0 Celsius and -8 Celsius during the day. A very, very, very strong signal for it to be cold or bitterly cold in the north through the second week, and especially towards the end of it. But remember, even these ensemble models can change quite quickly. It's not a guarantee that it will be cold at this range by any means, but it's strongly supporting the idea of a wintry spell of weather. Here's the 10-day GEFS ensemble mean pressure plot, so Friday the 9th of December, generated by averaging out all of the individual runs. In the ensemble, it's quite remarkable in my view, because more often than not, what we see is low pressure centred here to the northwest, Iceland, high pressure down towards the Azores, and a westerly flow pushing across the UK and into continental Europe. This is reversed though. We've got high pressure to the northwest, winds coming in from the northeast. The reason why I think it's very unusual is because when you average out all of the ensemble runs, usually, even when a cold pattern is being forecast by a good number of them, there are enough going for something different to flatten this out and to show a west or northwesterly flow. To see it coming in from the northeast 10 days ahead, being the ensemble mean, very, very notable indeed. Time to perk up and pay attention, I think, because it is indicating the possibility of a very wintry outbreak. Finally, in terms of the pressure plots, here's the European ECM equivalent to the GFS. The same message, high pressure over Greenland, a northeasterly flow likely to be covering the UK, potentially very cold and wintry if it is correct. And the 16-day GEFS postage stamp plots showing 2-metre temperatures. The individual stamps are small, but if you want to freeze a video, you can take a look at them. About 66% of those are forecasting cold conditions, the other 34% mild. That's really a very approximate summary of what they're going for. The other point, though, to take on board is that a greater number of them have milder conditions in the south than in the north, just really reinforcing the message that I've been given. Well, always read the small print. It says at the top, very, very important in life, but especially so when it comes to the UK's weather. But the message is, this looks like being the coldest start to winter since 2010. That's the small print, you can read it for yourself. Never a guarantee when it comes to the UK and cold weather. Anyway, to summarise, the next 2 weeks, week 1, it's going to be turning colder. Frost and fog will be patchy, and the chance of fog reduces later on as winds begin to strengthen. Not very wet on the whole, but there is a risk of rain, first in the north and especially the northwest, then maybe in the west as that area of low pressure moves southwards through the weekend, although as I mentioned, a good deal of uncertainty about how much impact it will have. Also, a chance in the east as showers push in on that easterly or northeasterly flow. As it turns colder, the risk of hill snow begins to increase and the altitude, the level to which snow falls, decreases. Finally, low pressure may be pushing up from the southwest towards the end of the first week. If that happens, it could lead to outbreaks of rain, somewhat milder air moving in. On its northern edge, there may be some snow, particularly over hills. Week 2, the signal from most of the computer model data is for it to be cold. There is a possibility of it turning milder in the south at times. The chance of snow increases, particularly in central and northern regions, but of course at this range it's impossible to be specific about the likely amounts, the timing, etc. Also, there is a possibility of it becoming very cold with a more widespread threat of snow. I think for that to happen, it really depends upon the northeasterly flow establishing itself across the UK. So, there we have it. I started off by saying that past performance is no guide to future performance, the investor's rule. Hopefully, I've explained why it's relevant to the UK's weather as we go through the next 2 weeks. A distinctly wintry flavour is in prospect and quite a few of us may see some snow falling at least. Of course, snow is always a very, very difficult thing to forecast in the UK and a lot of uncertainty remains. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. As ever, if you did, please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Thank you for watching now. Bye.